Well, we get it rolling on the Krueger Show. Not often that we go Sunday night, but you know what? Brian Peacock's in the house from Locked On 49ers. We thought, why not? Let's do it. Let's do it. We haven't streamed with Peacock in a while. One of the best in the biz. Guy who obviously knows the Niners, a wealth of information. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Krug sent you. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check that link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, and they will match you up to your first $100. Also, thanks to Marin Autoglass, marinautoglass.com on the web, and Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles down in Monterey. Call Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. We got some new sponsors coming on this week as well. Looking forward to telling you guys all about that. But, man, the Niners doing so many things that we can't go even 2 or 3 days without talking Niners. And so we welcome in Brian Peacock. What's going on, Brian? How are you, man?
Hey, I got to tell you, I've been hitting the brisket chili pretty hard up at Pig and a Pickle in Corte Madera. I'm in Marin now, and one of my favorite spots. My son likes it too. Goes with the straight hot dog, but the brisket chili is where it's at. So, yeah, it's a great.
I've never made chili with brisket. The times I have even tried to make brisket, it's just too chewy, and it's like I don't cook it well. I don't cook it long enough. These guys have it down, and then they put real pieces of brisket in this really spicy chili, which is, I shouldn't say it's really spicy. It's kind of moderately spicy, but it's really, really good. And the texture of the brisket and the chili is just amazing. And, Brian, I'm glad that you're here to talk little Niners. What do you think so far of this offseason? If we just kind of, without leading you in any direction, if I just said, give me your general vibe on what we've seen thus far. Are you happy? Are you not? Are you spending a lot of time on Locked On bickering over it? What's your take so far in the offseason?
No, I think the big take is that it hasn't changed all that much. I was a little bit, and obviously the offense hasn't changed at all at this point. And so the Colton McKivitz deal is like, okay, they added a 1-year extension, but he's already signed through 2024. So why'd they give him an extra year in 2025? That's a little odd. And then you see the numbers come through and you're like, okay, it wasn't just, they didn't just give him an extra year for $7 million. This is cap stuff. They knocked a little bit off the cap this year. They gave themselves some options in the future. McKivitz could be around. He could not be around. They could cut him if they wanted to. They could keep him around as a depth piece. He could be starting at guard. He could be starting at right tackle still in 2025. They just gave themselves options there. And so it makes a lot more sense than the reported, $1 year, $7 million extension from McKivitz. You're like, well, they're done the offensive line. No, I don't think they are, but they're doing actually the thing, Larry, that I think more teams should do. And that is you roll into the draft in April as if you could play a game that Sunday. And then the players you draft have to compete to find their spot on that roster. And that's where the 49ers are. I don't think they got better necessarily, but they didn't get worse either. And looking at the defensive line, I would say if I had to critique anything, is it really worth, void years and dead cap money in 2028 for Colton McKivitz and Yetur Gross-Matos? Like, that's kind of the weird. It's like, okay, if you have to put void years for, backup caliber players or, dirty starters, maybe, if you have to put void years in 2028 for it, then maybe you can't afford it. That's sort of like your buddy putting stuff on the credit card. It's like, if you're putting like fast food on the credit card, maybe you can't afford it. If you're putting if you're leasing a vehicle that you can't afford, maybe you should look somewhere else and go economy car. So those were some moves I was a little bit surprised at because they went really hard.
Have you been studying my spending habits, by the way?
I'm really big on no credit card debt. I to be honest with you, if I went somewhere and I didn't have enough money for it, I wouldn't be able to buy it because I don't even have a credit card in my wallet. That's how little I use a credit card. My wife now has a credit card, so we do have stuff on credit in my family, but it's rarely something that I put on there. I just don't do it, and maybe that's the way I'm wired. Maybe I'm not wired correctly. I got a hell of a mortgage here, though, talking about Marin County. So I got enough debt over there. But
hey, I watch the Sharks, and Mr. Wonderful would agree with you.
Yeah.
See, He's the guy saying, "Hey, brown bag it. Don't go to Subway every day. Don't
I'm a minimal guy.
bring a
I don't
thermos. Don't go to Starbucks.
I
That's
don't
what he's
try to
saying.
live above my means. I can make a really good latte. I can make a really good cocktail at home too. I don't need to go spending big on those items. I do like to go out and have a good time though. I do. That's the one thing I will spend on is going out with the friends. That's fun stuff. That's creating memories. But buying stuff is not my thing. The 49ers went shopping though on day one of free agency, just like they did last year, which was shocking to me last year when they did the Javon Hargrave thing, except they didn't go to the top of the market, which is where most people go right when the tampering period opens. They went to the sort of the mid-tier. They went to the middle class of free agency, but still went hard at it with Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos. And then they did the swap with the Texans to bring in Malik Collins. So I just thought that was interesting how hard they went to just fill spots and not try to wait until the second, third wave of free agency and potentially get similar class of player for maybe a little bit cheaper.
I don't really have too many complaints with the way they've gone about it. I mean, the guys they let go. Eric Armstead was easily the best, but I mean, you got Ray, you got Sam Darnold, Charlie Warner, Cleveland Farrell, Javon Kinlaw, Oren Burks. No problem with that. The guys that they retained, Chris Conley, John Feliciano, who were they had a couple others here that were minor. I thought were Kevin Givens, one of your defensive linemen. I don't really take too much, offense to any of that. I love the signing of the Leonard Floyd is my favorite, just because I think Leonard Floyd's quite a bit better than what they've had opposite Nick Bosa during the Shanahan regime. And I kind of like the Flyers on both tackles. I think Jordan Elliott is got a lot of talent. He was really good against the run. He's healthy. He's young. He's coming into his own, kind of a late bloomer. I liked him at Missouri a lot in the draft. It didn't happen for him. He was on some bad defenses. This year they had a pretty good defense. His numbers look pretty good. He's not old. He's healthy. I kind of like that one. And Malik Collins is enormously powerful and has gotten to be much better of a pass rusher. So I get no problem with what they've done. The only move I didn't like is I didn't love the move to go after Kendricks, and then I didn't love the pivot to go after Campbell. I mean, I just seemed like you got Jalen Graham, you got D. Winters. I've done 70 mock drafts. The linebacker group in this draft is awesomely deep. I mean, there's some really good linebackers that are going to be day 3 and maybe even undrafted.
And so they just drafted 2 of them. So
right. So I didn't get the Campbell.
If you're sitting here 11 months after a draft where you took 2 tight ends and 2 linebackers, and 2 of your needs are linebacker and tight end, then I think that's pretty telling about what happened in last year's draft. If you don't like any of those guys to come in and play a role, especially if you expect to get Dre Greenlaw back at some point during the season, and I get wanting veteran presence around the team, but whether it's Floyd, who's a player I like, and I like Collins as well, I think it's kind of telling, Larry, that the Texans were willing to trade Collins for Eric Armstead and take on all of Eric Armstead's extra, cap hit and his salary versus what Malik Collins was making. So they thought that was, would have been an upgrade. So I don't know, the Niners got better there, but I do like Collins as he's a pro. He's a good player. Leonard Floyd is a pro. So they got professional football players in. Devondre Campbell's a pro, and so they're going to line up, be able to line up and play tomorrow with a professional football squad, offense and defense, right? And so I like that. Did they need to go as hard as they did with some of those positions? Did Brandon Staley, did it feel like he's had a pretty big say from the moment walking in the building? I get that vibe with, trying to go after Kendrick, who he had. And I don't know. I just get a little bit of that vibe. Yeah, Floyd as well.
I mean, obviously Floyd and him were together in LA. I also thought the corner pickup was kind of under the radar. Isaac Yiadom. I saw him at BC. He's long. I mean, he's a long corner, and he kept coming off a really good year. And it's a very much a technique rich position, and he's always had the kind of the long levers and the athleticism and the balance and the agility. It's just about reps, and I feel like he's a better player now than when he came out of BC. I thought that was a nice pick. I didn't understand the Chase Lucas as much, but
I got a scouting report from you, Larry.
Yeah, go ahead.
From my guy Ross Jackson, who does the Locked On Saints podcast, and he was a big fan of Yedem, and he said, "You guys got a good one." He says he's super technically sound, isn't the most gifted physically, but a ton of athleticism. He's got some of that length, and so he relies on technique and always being in position, a guy you can trust, and he's going to be someone who's well liked around the building.
Nice. And and he's got experience. It's like, to me, it's you got to have some experience. Not always, but I mean, it's really does help when you're playing big games and you're trying to bust into a secondary that has all these existing players in it already. All right, so that's what they've done so far. And it hasn't been like it was the last couple of years. The last couple of years, they let everybody walk. They signed Mooney 2 years ago, last year Hargrave. They went with the big name guy. This year they went with more of a depth play. But now they're heading into the draft. What do you view? Here we are. It's St. Patrick's Day. Middle of March. We're basically 6 weeks away from the draft. What's the number one need right now? What's the number one need? Because you kind of said it, Brian. They kind of filled all their needs. It's almost as if they said to themselves, hey, let's get into a position where we're taking best player available more times than not in the draft because we're kind of covered everywhere. That's the vibe I get. But other people are saying, no, it's got to be, O-line, or it's got to be a corner. It's got to be D-line. What's the priority going into the draft when you look at their roster?
I mean, they could go a ton of ways because they could play a game tomorrow if they had to. So I love that. And I hope they do go best player available. And I think that's generally what you should do in that situation. And I think they've forced some need a few times recently in drafts, and especially those early picks in rounds 1, 2, 3. And it hasn't worked out as well as some of the picks in later rounds. So whatever they're doing in rounds 4, 5, especially 6, 7, do that, but just do that in round 1 with a more physically talented player. And maybe you're finding yourself perennial pro bowlers there at pick 31. I still think offensive line meets up with all the talent in the draft and what the 49ers need. I do think that
who's your favorite? Do you have a favorite of the tackles?
I have.
I mean, obviously Alt or something, but I mean,
yeah,
of the guys that you think might be there.
I love Fuaga, and I do think I've seen him as high as pick 10 to the Jets. The Jets have done some things in free agency in the offensive line, so maybe they don't go offensive tackle at 10 after all. I don't think he's going to go that high. As fun as his tape was to watch, he's been the most fun player I've watched. I think Graham Barton and Fuaga have been the most fun, and we actually just finished an episode with Croc where we were breaking down Graham Barton and Amarius Mims, and I would be on board with any of those names I've mentioned at pick 31. I think Graham Barton's more of the third round guy physically, but that plays like an animal and plays up and is a better player. Is he a round 1 guy? I don't know if he is. I'd put him more in the second round. But Mims is a freak of nature. He doesn't move backwards. He's so well proportioned for a guy who's 340 pounds. It's unreal. And he's raw as heck. He's only played 8 games. But if you drafted someone like Amarius Mims, and they might have to move up into the 20s, and they absolutely could do that. In fact, they moved up from 31 to 25 to draft Brandon Ayuk in 2020. So, that's a move they can make, is to go up and get the right guy if he's there, whether it's Fuaga or someone like Mims. I could absolutely see those guys getting into the 20s and seeing the 49ers going and making a move there. And for Fuaga, you plug him in at right tackle and he starts day 1 and you say, okay, Colton, you're the swing tackle or you're competing somewhere else. But if you draft someone like Mims, who's super raw, maybe he doesn't even start right away. Maybe he even redshirts an entire year like they've done in the past with some rookie players, and they've done it on their offensive line, right? And even with Spencer Burford kind of playing part-time roles. And and Mims is a really interesting player because how physically gifted he is, but he's going to fall later than he should for his physical attributes, just because you don't know what to do with him, and he's raw, and he might not be able to play for any of those teams right away. I love the BYU kid. I always wreck his name, so I don't even want to say it, but he's really fun to watch. If I looked at a player who I would bet money on right now, who could be an early starter in his career, still has some upside, is going to be there at pick 31 for the 49ers, I'd probably go with Suamatai out of BYU, and I think he is an offensive tackle in the NFL. And then you have these other guys that are really fun to watch, like Fautanu from Washington. He's probably the best interior lineman in the draft. He's got long enough arms. Is a team gonna just will no team allow him to play tackle because he's 6'3" and 3/8? He's got the arm length and he's a really good tackle in college. He'll probably move inside in the NFL. He'll probably go before the Niners pick. Jordan Morgan is another guy who's probably going to move inside in the NFL. I'd probably rather try to swing for someone who I thought was going to stick at tackle. And then you got guys like Patrick Paul, who's a mountain of a man, who I'd probably prefer more in the second round as well. But maybe you move down, maybe use one of those extra fourth rounders, Larry, to move up from the second round to draft one of these offensive linemen if you do go corner, or dark horse position in round 1, wide receiver, Larry.
Yeah, I want to get into that as well. It's funny, this offensive line group, it's like Alt, Fashanu, Fuaga, who's awesome. I mean, you got to watch the Fuaga tape. Not you, Brian, but people watching this. I mean, this kid is just like, he's like a Coke machine with a bad attitude or something. He's just a ridiculous wide body. Then there's J.C. Latham. In a lot of ways, J.C. Latham is the physical prototype. I mean, he is just a ridiculous 6'6", like 350, but he looks kind of lean. Mims is even maybe more the physical prototype. He's 6'8", 340 with like a lean waist.
And 36-inch arm length as well for me.
Yeah, but what worries me about him is just the 8 games. The guy's only played 8 games. That always is a concern. You got hurt at the combine. I'm always worried about guys who don't play. I like Jordan Morgan's profile quite a bit, but then you see the short arms. I talked to Trent Williams about offensive tackles in the draft late in the year, just messing around in the locker room. He loves the kid from Oklahoma, Tyler Guyton. He's like, he's a road grader in the run game. And I'm like, are you biased because he's your, he's your homeboy from Oklahoma? He's like, no, man, I like him. I like him a lot. So, I mean, Guyton is considered destructive in the run game. He might be there. The Sumatea kid, I thought he walking around the combine, I thought he looked like about 280, 285. Find out he was 324. So, I mean, that's a great sign. When a guy walks around and you think he's 280 and he's really 325, I mean, that's a great sign. Patrick Paul's kind of high cut, but he's got ridiculously long arms. The Yale kid's got like historically crazy long arms. I mean, he's like 38-inch long arms, but he didn't play this year with the quad. The guys that I kind of like are down the road, Javon Foster from Missouri. I watched him in the one-on-ones, just absolutely stonewall guys. I mean, as soon as he gets his hands on you, you're just cooked. And he's 6'5", 320, but I mean, he's got a frame. He might be able to put on 10 pounds, 15 pounds. Christian Jones from Texas, I really like. I really like Ladarius Henderson from Michigan. I like the Maryland kid. But the guy that I thought was, the 2 guys that I really have just think, man, I want those guys on the team, are both of the South Dakota State guys, Garrett Greenfield and McCormick, I think his name is.
Mason McCormick, yeah.
Mason McCormick. McCormick worked out incredibly well. These guys, I've watched some videos of them kind of hanging out together. I mean, if I'm the Niners, I'd try to get both those guys. I mean, Greenfield is wide and athletic and probably going to be in there in the 3rd round. McCormick is destructive and wide, and they play really well together. I mean, to me, that's a combo I wouldn't mind getting together. And I know it's South Dakota State, so you never know. But McCormick went to the combine and worked out like as well as almost anybody at the guard position in any conference. So I really like that combo from South Dakota State, and I kind of like the gigantic blonde guy from Wyoming, Frank Crum, who's 6'8", 313. He worked out great.
Yeah,
he looked really, really good. Walter Rouse is not a bad prospect, who started at Stanford and now is at Oklahoma. So I mean, it's a really good tackle draft. I want to go tackle in the 1st round. But then, you know what? Let's talk about your idea of wide receiver, because that to me might be the better, place to go in the 1st round. I know everybody wants to go with the tackle, and they need a tackle. There's no question they need a tackle. But the wide receivers that could be there. I mean, like if Brian Thomas is there, I'm running that card in. I just think he's tremendous. And I'm not as big a fan of Lad McConkey, Troy Franklin, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell. I kind of like a little bit. Worthy obviously ran that crazy 40. But then further down the list, guys like Xavier Legette at 230 pounds and running in the 4.3s. Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky, very deep, very Debo-like
guy, right? I think if I had to guess who Kyle Shanahan likes, and I was on Debo Samuel. That one was pretty easy just because they were coaching the coach in the Senior Bowl that year. But I knew they would like Brandon Ayuk. The guys I think they like, that Kyle Shanahan's going to like the most, is Malachi Corley, just because he's so similar to Debo Samuel. And there's been a lot of next Debos in drafts recently. He's the closest when he's 5'10", 215 pounds. He will truck guys. I was actually a former running back. You want to do wide back stuff, and if maybe the 49ers are thinking about moving off of Debo Samuel at some point in the next 12 months, Malachi Corley would be a nice little replacement there. Could come in and have a low stress job the first year, and then probably more of a second round pick than someone you have to take at 31 too. So that's definitely a name to circle for 49ers fans. But I think he's going to love Lad McConkey. He's going to love Lad McConkey. He's going to love Ricky Pearsall, I think, just the way these guys can separate, the way they run their routes, especially McConkey. And one of the comps I've seen for Lad McConkey is Emmanuel Sanders, who Kyle Shanahan traded for with the 49ers, and which is an interesting one because he's a little taller, but profiles similarly as an athlete. And, Sanders was a ridiculous athlete coming out of college. And just, could separate just that quick twitch. And McConkey has that. So I don't know if they'll go wide receiver at 31, but there might be a really good player there. And whether they trade Ayuk now or Debo Samuel after next year, you need someone that could come in and start next season at wide receiver, and it takes a year. So you might have to start that clock now, get developing a guy now, so you don't go into next year's draft thinking we got to start a guy that can start day one, because that's difficult to do in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So I think wide receiver is a sneaky need in this draft, even if they haven't traded anybody before the draft. I think second round has been just the prime spot for wide receivers, though, in recent years. And so there's going to be a good player there near pick 63 at wide receiver. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the 49ers went wide receiver at that spot.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, because, you've been covering the Niners for a while, and I've been covering the Niners for a while. And we can talk about what makes sense, and we can talk about the depth chart, and we can talk about the needs as we see it. And then this all happens annually between the end of the year and the draft, in April. And then we get to that second week in April, and reality starts to hit in. They're going to go defensive tackle, or they're going defensive line. It's like they always go defensive line. It's like all roads lead back to the defensive line. If that is the case this year, we can't act surprised, right? Because they see value in the position. They've talked it up. They've done some nice things. I think we've already kind of discussed. But the question, I guess, is this, and the question we're not going to get the answer to probably before the draft is, are the guys that they got on the D-line considered upgrades over Armstead, lateral moves, slight downgrades, as you maybe suggested? And if so, aren't they going right back to the D-line at 31? I think they're going O-line. I think they're going corner. I think they're, at some point. But if you said, what are they going to do early? They always seem like they go D-line. And I'm just kind of wondering, if they do go D-line, it's a deep group and with a lot of different kind of guys. You got 1 techniques. You got 3 techniques. You got 5 techniques. You got edge rushers. You got, glorified outside linebackers. What if they go D-line? Who are they going to go after? And who should they go after?
When I do some of these mock drafts and use the mock draft simulators, and it's just fun to play around with, it's just, if this happens, then what scenarios for the 49ers, who's more likely to get there? And, some players I see that are sometimes maybe the best prospect available are Chop Robinson who's a dynamic athlete. I think he compares very similarly to D Ford, who the 49ers are still trying to figure out how to replace across from Nick Bosa. Yeah, and Leonard Floyd is I think a pretty good option for the 49ers this year, but they haven't done anything long term at that spot across from Nick Bosa. So they could absolutely draft a player on the defensive line there, probably at tackle or edge. So I think Chop Robinson is going to be a better pro, is statistically going to be better in the NFL. And despite being a smaller edge player, he's pretty physical at setting the edge, and he's got that amazing get off, which I know Chris Kosarek's going to like. So I wouldn't be shocked at all there. There's the Johnny Newton from from Illinois? Is it the interior defensive lineman, a little bit undersized? He's usually a really good player that's kind of staring at you on the board when you're doing those mock drafts and you're trying to figure out who's going to go late in round one. So, look, I wouldn't be shocked, and I don't think I'd be mad at it either if the 49ers went D-line, because I think they've been proven right about how important that is. And be great on the D-line first and worry about the rest of it. And they were already a really good offense, and they're bringing the whole group back. And offensively, sometimes it's difficult to have a guy that you draft jump right in anyway. So, I wouldn't be shocked at all if the 49ers went that route in round one. I'd probably look at some other spots. But look, if all the offensive linemen go and the best player available is a defensive lineman, go for it, man. There's going to be other offensive linemen, other position. It's not a one-player draft. It's not a one-position draft. Get the best player. If the best player is a defensive lineman, it's the reason the 49ers have been so good and have gone to NFC championship games and gone to Super Bowls, because I think that's the right strategy right now in this league, is to get as good as you can on the defensive line.
It's hard to decide who my favorites are. I mean, Darius Robinson was kind of late to football, and he was the practice player of the week award winner though in Mobile. I mean, he looked tremendous at the practices. Chris Jenkins is, on the Bruce Feldman freaks list from Michigan, but he's like, you kind of wonder, is he a little bit more of a workout guy than he is a production guy? Michael Hall from Ohio State is 6'3", 290. He's not as big as some of these other guys, but I think his pass rush win rate this year was really, really high. Like
explosive. Yeah, he's a lot to handle with his quickness inside.
Yeah, and then, I'm kind of an A&M fan, so I've seen Jackson McKinley quite a bit, and McKinley is a two-time captain and kind of a glue piece for them, but he's a true one technique. It's like, then there's Tavondre Sweat from Texas, who's also a one technique, kind of a nose guard, non-pass rushing type player. And then, his teammate there, Byron Murphy, is a pass rusher. The kid from Florida State who transferred from Western Michigan, Braden Fisk, is really, really interesting. I kind of, when I watched the workouts, I thought that Rook Roro. I mean, that guy, I mean, that just to make Greg Papa make that pronunciation every week would be incredible. But this kid is, when you work out and when you see his workout, you're like, oh, that guy's about 6'2", 270. If you just watched it, because the way he moves, then you're like, no, this guy's 6'4", 295. He's a big time athlete at that size. He might be the best pure athlete I've seen at that size in this draft. So, I mean, and he's projected to go like middle of the second round. So they could probably get to 31, trade back 3 or 4 spots and still, get some draft capital and still get a guy like that.
Defensive linemen are shrinking, aren't they, Larry? There's so many of those undersized defensive tackles coming out of college right now. LSU, Mekhi Wingo is another one that I like. And so if the 49ers want to go 3 technique, they can find that well beyond the first round, I think, in this draft.
And they want this, like, get up the field, wide 9, everybody shoot a gap, rush the quarterback. Everybody's got to be a pass rusher. It was weird watching Kinlaw, because Kinlaw so did not fit what they wanted to do, but they were, contractually wed to him. They had drafted him, but they want these one gap penetrator, get up the field, rush the passer kinds of guys. And it kind of shows. I mean, they re-signed Givens. What's he? That's exactly what he is. He's a one gap penetrator. Do you think they need one just run stuffing player? I mean, I really loved the idea when I heard of people saying DJ Jones might come back. But, it's hard for me to see them investing a one technique nose guard.
They haven't done it. That's
I mean,
I think we should take I think we should take those guys off our watch list for the 49ers in the draft. And maybe they're noticing that they need to add a little bit more beef, but they've had a tough time replacing DJ Jones. And DJ Jones himself was a little bit of a surprise. He was a 6th-round pick and made good and, earned himself a lot of money. And I don't think they should have signed him necessarily because he probably made too much. But, and if he does get cut and the 49ers end up bringing him back on the cheap, I think that'd be fantastic because the 49ers have missed that and haven't really replaced it. And even Javon Kinlaw, they try to utilize him as the one technique after he lost 30 pounds. And so that didn't really make much sense either. They were just trying to figure out where to put him, I think, at some point. I absolutely would love to see the Niners draft one of those guys that's wider than he is tall, that can eat up blocks, but they really haven't to this point prioritized that style of player. And if there's a guy that they have that's strong and a good run defender, he also has a little upfield burst. And so if a guy doesn't have that upfield burst, I don't think the 49ers are going to be interested.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. What about number 3 quarterback? What do you think in number 3 quarterback? I mean, they've got obviously Purdy, and they don't want to disrupt his rhythm in any way. But at the same time, your number 2 quarterback just left. You have Brandon Allen, who could be a number 2. He was Joe Burrow's number 2 just 2 years ago. Do you go the veteran route? I mean, Carson Wentz is out there. Isn't he? Is he not? I mean, Wentz is like 4-0 against the Niners. Shanahan always likes these guys that beat him because he's got this great respect for them. So would you rather go with the veteran like Wentz, or would you rather promote Brandon Allen to number 2 and go with a rookie? And if so, which rookie do you go with? Do you try to trade for a Zach Wilson or somebody like that? Do you steer clear of that? What's your go? I mean, heck, if I knew that Justin Fields was just going to cost a 6th-round pick, I think I would have advocated for the Niners last week to trade a 6th-round pick for Justin Fields. I mean, you might look at it as this. What do you need? You don't need a starter necessarily, but you don't know if Brock Purdy's going to get hurt. Not that he's injury prone or anything, but what you want is that quarterback that if your quarterback misses 5 or 6 games because of an injury, that you can plug this guy in, that you'll win 3 or 4 of those 5 games, and you'll still be on a playoff trajectory when Brock Purdy comes back. I think that's what you're looking for. Who is that though? Is it Wentz, or are you looking for something on the cheap cap? I would go for the rookie. I mean, yeah. There's also Joe Milton in this draft. Joe Milton has one of the biggest skill sets of anybody I've seen. I don't think he's good. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if you had to play him in week 1, you'd lose. But he is 6'5", 6'6", with one of the greatest arms of all time. You could potentially hit a home run by, having that kid kind of fulfill his potential around all this talent. He's got a way, way bigger arm than Trey Lance. I mean, people are telling me, "Oh, Trey Lance is a big arm." You haven't seen a big arm until you've seen this guy throw it.
Yeah.
Are you intrigued by the idea of turning Milton? Milton's the home run shot. If he becomes good in a backup role, somebody's going to give you multiple number 1s for him.
I love it. Joe Milton, day 3 pick. I think that's what I would do. You got to go cheap. And the 49ers have all these day 3 picks this year. And it's a draft that doesn't look quite as deep potentially because there were so few underclassmen declaring this year versus past years. And so things might get a little slim. Do you go quarterback? Does Kyle Shanahan still have that PTSD from the NFC Championship game 2 years ago? And does he even want a 3rd quarterback? So does he just bring in a camp arm, a couple of guys, undrafted guys, and let him battle it out and let Brandon Allen be the number 2 guy? I think they need to go cheap. There's no reason to spend a lot on it. I'm with you. I mean, I was a big fan of Justin Fields. I liked Fields more than Trey Lance coming out. It's been pretty amazing to watch all those guys just fail in the NFL. And so all of that for nothing, trading up. And all the 3 guys we argued about, none of them are on the team they were on anymore. And they're all bad, apparently. I was actually kind of shocked that if you could get Mac Jones for a 6th-round pick, that he's not already a San Francisco 49er. So that might have been more up to Mac Jones where he wanted to go back home, Jacksonville area. Justin Fields, we're finding out there's 4 other teams in on him. He chose Pittsburgh, and Chicago got less because they wanted to do right by him and send him where he wanted to go. And, I like hearing that. And I think there was the same story about the 49ers and Trey Lance, right? Trey was like, yeah, I'd like the Cowboys. I'll go to the Cowboys. And so the Niners traded him there. And who knows, maybe the 49ers are one of the teams that were in on Justin Fields. I don't think he's a great fit for the Shanahan offense. It's based on timing. It's the one thing that Fields has struggled at. But, you just found yourself in the literal last pick in the NFL draft, a starting big-time quarterback for your franchise. Go back into the draft on day 3 with one of these extra picks and draft a guy and develop him and let him be the number 3 after Brandon Allen. That's not a position I would spend a lot on right now, because I don't know if there's anybody that you could bring in that's going to make a big difference and be that much better than Brandon Allen as the number 2.
All right, going back to 2021, who did you like? Because at the time, it was Lawrence was going 1. Wilson was going 2. I really liked both those guys quite a bit. I liked Wilson a lot. Now, I liked Lance's potential, but I knew it was a long-range play. I loved the measurables on Fields, 4.4 flat and all this stuff. But he just, when you turned on the film, none of the things that he showed in his testing, he didn't play that way. You know what I mean? The guy ran 4.4 flat, but he got sacked a ton. And it was like he had this unbelievable touch and accuracy, but he held the ball too long most of the time. And there was just all kinds of inconsistency in his tape. So Fields was like, you're always intrigued. Oh, it's like, hey, look, he's 6'2", he's 215, 220, and he's going to run 4.4 flat and then Shanahan's system with all these weapons. But, it's not quite that simple. So I liked Fields and I like these guys, but of the group, I think I probably like Zach Wilson the most. And now here he is. He's probably, a bust by most people's thoughts at this point. So it's like, who did you like in this last draft? And then, it's like, have you noticed that the draft that's coming, all of the guys are going to be great?
Right.
But the draft of yesteryear, they're all bad. If you talk to anybody, Caleb Williams is going to be great. Drake May is going to be great. Jaden Daniels takes your breath away. J.J. McCarthy's the ultimate winner. Michael Penix is just a magic man. Bo Nix is just never loses. Everybody's great. Joe Milton's going to be great. Michael Pratt at Tulane's going to be great. Spencer Rattler, oh my God, I can't even tell you. And then here we are. We look at the group from 2021, and they're all bad. So it's like,
how dare you leave out Sam Hartman, Jimmy G part 2?
There you go, Sam Hartman. That's and Devin Leary, Carter Bradley, who's Gus Bradley's kid. I kind of like Austin Reed from the Hilltoppers. I've watched him kind of a little bit this year. Some people really like Jordan Travis. Pratt definitely had a good career at Tulane. So it's like going to the, betting, trying to figure out which of these quarterbacks is good. It's like going to the racetrack. You can either bet the favorite or try to beat the favorite. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of a thing.
It's chaos.
There's something about Caleb and May and Daniels that makes me nervous. I kind of like in this year's draft Penix. I like Penix. I don't know, maybe a little bit of McCarthy. But Daniels has a beautiful motion, but he's played with those great receivers. Drake May is big and fast and strong, but North Carolina seems like there's a lot of busts that come out of North Carolina. Caleb Williams, I don't know if it's owning the team or crying or what is, but there's something that tells me that he's not going to be this transformational type player. And I don't know. It's all guesswork at this point, but isn't it interesting how the old quarterbacks, we all thought they were going to be great and they've all been bad. And now here we are a few years later and we're kind of all in the, hey, all these guys are going to be great again mode.
It happens every year. You get really mesmerized by it. There's 32 picks and every fan base is going to go home thinking that they just nailed it and drafted 7 all pros, and it's just, we know it's not going to be the case. You just don't know which guys aren't going to live up to it. And it's amazing that Justin Fields goes for a conditional 4th or 6th round pick and Jaden Daniels' scouting report sounds a lot the same, and someone's going to take him number 2 or number 3 overall and believe that he's, the next savior of their franchise. And there's some great tape of Drake May, and then some stuff where like, oh, I don't know if I love that. And there's just a lot of work to do for these guys, and really, it's what happens upstairs. Who's the most maniacal worker is probably the guy that's going to end up being great from that group. And to answer your question about 2021, Justin Fields was my guy by far. I was blown away that they weren't talking about him going number 2, and it was just the foregone conclusion that Zach Wilson was number 2. So I didn't end up watching as much Zach Wilson just because we kind of all knew it was between Fields and Trey Lance and Mac Jones for the number 3 pick once the 49ers traded up. And I went deep dives and watched everything of all those guys. And I frankly was shocked that people were talking about Mac Jones and Trey Lance in the same tiers as Justin Fields, just because of how gifted Fields was physically and how tough he was on top of it. Now, there were some things that obviously were part of his scouting report that showed up big time in the NFL, and it's the timing. And he was in more of a Shanahan tree offense, and I just think that was a terrible fit for him. My comp for Fields coming out was oddly enough Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson's the same type of guy. Runs into a few too many sacks, holds onto the ball a lot. Likes to roll out, make big throws, throws a beautiful ball down the field with accuracy, but he's not so much timing, 3-step drop, get the ball out over the middle of the field with timing. And the Fields is the same way. So I actually like them together in that offense in Pittsburgh. I think you can run a very similar offense with those two quarterbacks. But Fields, with how physically gifted he is, and you saw the development from guys like Josh Allen and other quarterbacks in the league. Like, I can't think of a quarterback who's more physically gifted than Fields. When you're 6'3", 225, run 4.4 flat, and have a legitimately great arm, and can make accurate throws down the field. And to fail in the NFL, most of the time when guys fail, it's like, you're drinking scissor in the car before practice. You're not watching tape. You're a bad leader. You get injured. And Justin Fields hasn't really been any of those things. He might be one of the best physical prospects that's actually tried and still failed in the NFL. And so that's why I believed in him. It was like, if he's wired correctly and he works hard, he's going to be good because he's too physically gifted. And it turned out all 3 of them weren't great. And I'm still shocked that Lance didn't have any opportunity anywhere to even be a number 2 quarterback. He's in number 3 and just stuck behind Dak Prescott, which is a terrible spot for him. So at least there's potentially a path to play for Justin Fields. But I don't know when the next time we're going to see Mac Jones or Trey Lance is.
It's amazing too. There are so many quarterbacks that are in the Hall of Fame that didn't get it going until they were 27 or 28, or longer. If you're Steve Young, or Roger Staubach and Terry Bradshaw, and you name it, Dan Fouts. I mean, there's tons of them. Kurt Warner. I mean, you want to go back, Sonny Jurgensen, Len Dawson. These guys didn't get it going until they were 27. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that are in the draft this year that everybody thinks are going to be good. There's a lot of quarterbacks that were in the draft a few years ago that nobody thinks are going to be any good. History tells us that one of these bad quarterbacks is going to be remade into good, whether it be Trey or Zach Wilson or Fields or Mac, or one of these guys that supposedly sucks is going to get it going. Who do you think it's going to be?
Well, probably Zach Wilson if he ends up a 49er, which I think is one of the possibilities. I don't think he's going to get traded, because if Fields is worth a 6th and Mac Jones is worth a 6th, then certainly there's no draft picks going the other way to the Jets for Zach Wilson. So I don't know, has he officially been cut yet? He'll get cut at some point.
No, I mean, I think they're afraid to cut him because they don't really know the health status of Rodgers, and is he going to retire? And
too, right? It's guaranteed salary, so you don't save anything by cutting him either. But
right.
It was like, you got to go. You got to get him out of there.
And that Zach Wilson would love to play for Shanahan. I saw an interview that he did before the draft where he was almost begging to be a 49er. Steve Young's talked to him before because of the BYU connection, and feels like he would love to play for Shanahan. It's funny. It's like you just said, what's happened to Zach Wilson? If we just take a minute and talk about Zach Wilson, I just think that he's got 2 issues going. One, he made a really bad mistake with how he dealt with criticism, and he tried to deflect it onto his teammates and tried to deflect it away from himself in New York City. That breaks the code, and everybody went against him at that point. It's like he was persona non grata from that moment on. That's one. But then football wise, what I see is just that he played in kind of a clean pocket situation at BYU. And the NFL, you just always have to be comfortable playing in a muddy pocket with guys' bodies all around you. And Purdy does it exceptionally well. Zach Wilson just doesn't do that well. He feels the need to escape and make plays. He can. He does have great arm talent. I think Shanahan and this offense would be a great thing for Zach Wilson. I think it would be hugely unpopular. From what I can tell, every time I say anything good about Zach Wilson, the people in the chat just rise up with, an army of just anger at Zach Wilson. It's like Zach Wilson banged their girlfriend or something.
He's got the punchable face. That's in the scouting report on the negative side. And it's hard for people to get past, I think.
People hate Zach Wilson. But that's what I see as far as like, can you get him used to having bodies around him and getting used to the NFL pocket? If he does, he's smart enough, sharp enough, fast enough, good enough arm. He's got all the traits that it takes. It's just that, can he operate with bodies around his legs?
Yeah, I don't like the aspect of, and it's still hard, and we don't know these guys, but, from afar, you see Mac Jones and Zach Wilson really felt like they just kind of folded when the pressure got a little bit too much. And as bad as the situation was for Justin Fields, you didn't see that. So if I had to guess someone that could overcome it, you have to get in the right offense. There's not that many teams running an offense that's going to fit Justin Fields' skill set. But, maybe with the Pittsburgh Steelers, with Russell Wilson there, maybe that's the guy I'd probably still bet on, just because I'd still be betting on the traits. And I just don't see a path for Trey Lance anywhere, but I would love to see the guy get a shot, because he's got a lot of ability and he seems like a good dude. But how quickly the 49ers moved off, and I haven't heard anything from anybody say a bad word about Trey Lance, but how quickly the 49ers moved off Lance, don't you think that they didn't like something about him that was more than just how quickly he got good playing NFL quarterback? You think there was something else that we're like, we got duped? He's a good kid, but he's not a worker, or maybe he's not going to get it as quickly as we thought. I feel like there's something else there that we're not seeing the whole picture on Trey Lance, because they moved away real quickly.
I don't think they liked. I think they loved the kid and hated everything about him as a quarterback. Hated his processing, hated his arm strength, hated his accuracy. I think they loved the kid. Loved the kid's family, loved the traits, but didn't really scout the player. And when they actually saw the player up close, they're like, this kid stinks. He can't throw the layups. He doesn't make the layups. His arm strength is not what you think. His accuracy is not what you think. I think that's what I think happened.
His athleticism wasn't what it was sold to be either. As far as
athleticism was ordinary. He's a fullback type mover, right? Yeah. He wasn't that. His arm strength was. He had good strength, but it wasn't crazy by any stretch.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't enough of an arm that you're overlooking other stuff to be like, oh, this guy's just too talented.
Slow release. Really inconsistent accuracy. That's what I saw.
There's something to that, because that was the COVID year, right? The 2020 draft. And the story goes that Kyle Shanahan was on like 1,000 Zoom calls with him. So he just liked him. They chatted it up with him, and he liked the kid. So I think you might be right about what it was. It was as much that as anything else. And one thing, and I think this is a mistake that Kyle Shanahan has made multiple times now, Kyle Shanahan kind of wants to see it from his quarterbacks on the college level, see that pro style system, see him play a little bit more what it's going to look like in the NFL. And there's only two teams that play like a pro style offense anymore in college football, and it's North Dakota State and Iowa. And he went and drafted CJ Beathard, and he went and drafted Trey Lance out of those two schools. And I think that helps Kyle to visualize how that player is going to look in his offense a little more, because he actually sees a more pro style offense.
He reminds me a lot of Alex Smith, in that great paper prospect. Like, oh my God, this guy graduated college with an econ degree in 2 years, and he's number one on the Wonderlic, and he's 6'4", and he's 208. It was like he could do everything except he couldn't play football. But eventually, that's why I really think Trey is the guy that I would bet on eventually getting it. Why? Because football is the family business. He is smart enough. He is athletic enough. He does want it enough, and he'll stay healthy enough. So if all those things happen, I think Trey Lance is going to be good, but it's going to be like 7 years from now, 6 years from now. He's going to have a beard. He's going to be like 3 teams from now. You know what I mean? He doesn't have feel because he hasn't played, but he does have traits, and they're real, and eventually he'll get it, but it's just not now, and they're ready to roll right now.
Alex Smith had an opportunity to just fail for a long time and at least play. Like, I don't know where Trey's going to get reps. He's going to have to go play in the XFL or whatever, the NFL Europe. Go play with Tom Sula over there. I don't know where he's going to go play and get the reps that he needs. And that's the one thing he had to have coming out of college. It was plain as day. The one thing, you can't draft Trey Lance and not play him because he has to play. He needs reps.
He's the poster boy for why the NFL needs a minor league.
Yep.
All right, a couple more before we call it quits here. One is, if you're a betting man, do the Niners wind up with 1, 2, or 3 between Rice's kid, Gore's kid, and McCaffrey's brother? And who's the most likely to be a Niner, and who's the best fit? I've studied all 3 of these guys pretty extensively. I talked to Christian about Luke in the locker room in November. I'm like, you watch your bro? And he's like, dude, it's the most fun thing I do in my life. He was like, you know how football players sometimes, especially the star football players, they try to give you as little as possible and the answers are as short as possible. He was doing an interview where he was doing that, and every answer was, 3 to 7 words. And then I asked him about his brother, and he went on for 3.5 minutes or something like that. And that's what you do for your brother. But this, his brother is interesting. He was a quarterback who switched to receiver this year. He went all conference. He runs in the high 4.4s. He's pretty good size. He's more like the dad. He looks a little bit more like the dad. He's interesting. I mean, he makes a lot of tough catches. And then Rice's kid's very interesting too, because he's not Rice, but nobody is, but he's not bad. I mean, if you watch him, there's some urgency to his game, and he really knows how to play, and he knows how to get in and out of breaks, and he's got pretty good hands. He's really competitive at the catch point. And then Frank Gore's kid literally is Frank. I don't think I've ever seen a football player look more like another football player than Frank looks like his dad. It's I'm not saying he's going to play, 14 years and be a Hall of Famer, but I'd say right now, I've never seen a back look like he's got the exact same full speed cuts and really decisive cuts inside and
body tape, the face. It's even when he talks, the way he speaks, is everything.
Yeah, and Frank's all over him. You can tell Frank's just in his grill. But what do you think? Are the Niners going to wind up with any of those guys? Who do you like out of those guys?
If I had to choose one, I'd say Frank Gore Jr., because Frank Gore Sr. is in the 49ers front office now. And I think he'll go latest. And, I like that third round or third day running back scenario. So I could absolutely see the 49ers, late in the draft going with Frank Gore Jr., and I would absolutely love it. Brandon Rice, actually, I like a lot. He's the best prospect of the 3. And there's something about the way he moves where I did see some Jerry, it's not, he doesn't look like Jerry Rice. You wouldn't say, oh, that's Jerry Rice's kid. But there were the way he ran this slant route one time and his knees were kind of high. And I was like, oh, there is a little Jerry there. He's thicker than Jerry was, but, similar height. He's a little over 6'2", 208, ran 4.5 flat. So, solid athleticism. He's got some physicality to him. I like Brandon Rice. I think he'd be a really good player for the 49ers if you get him, maybe late round 3. Is he there in round 4? I'm not sure. I've heard people talk about him as a second round pick. I don't know if I see that. And Luke McCaffrey, I bet Kyle Shanahan sees a lot of not so much Ed or Christian, but himself in Luke McCaffrey.
That's
Kyle
interesting.
was that skinny. wanted to be a quarterback, had to become a wide receiver in college, transferred, ended up at Texas, quicker than fast sort of a guy. Luke McCaffrey hit the 3.7 cone, and Kyle Shanahan loves receivers that run a fast 3 cone. I would love it even more if Luke McCaffrey had experience returning kicks and punts, because the 49ers lost Ray McCloud in free agency. So they need someone that could return some kicks. So if you're talking about on day 3, Luke McCaffrey, who's got some ability and some quickness, and you like the human being and the family, and believe in what kind of a worker he's going to be, if he could be a special teams player for you, then I'm on board with that one. But I'm not familiar if McCaffrey ended up returning any kicks or anything like that in college, but he's athletic. So I think it's easy for 49ers fans to just get really excited about those names. I think it's more than likely they draft none of them than any one of them. But I just think because Frank Gore is probably going to go last of the 3, I think he's probably the most likely. And the 49ers can always use an extra running back.
Couple supers. I'm old. Greg says we got to get Mekhi Becton if he's not signed. Mekhi Becton is just a monster at tackle. Do you see any?
He was Amarius Mims. Amarius Mims 4 years ago.
I mean, he's got knee problems, but he did make 16 or 17 starts this year. There's also Trent Brown, who's got some weight problems, but man, he's a big time guy. I mean, these are behemoth tackles that would almost take, tackle off the list, at least at the start of the draft, if the Niners acquired them. Are you an advocate of Becton or a return trip from Trent Brown?
I was an advocate in past off seasons of the 49ers swapping Kinlaw, who now ended up with the Jets, by the way, didn't he? Javon Kinlaw.
Yeah.
Trading
Becton,
and sort of.
I'm with you on that.
Reclaim him. I don't know if he's the perfect fit for where the 49ers are right now. Maybe if they end up drafting an interior offensive lineman, but there's no tackles there for him, they will need to add a tackle, I think. So then maybe post draft, if he's still available, on a short term, show me sort of a deal, I would like that. Let him compete, and whether it's being a swing tackle or just ends up winning the job and starting right tackle, I'd be down with that. But I don't think signing Mekhi Becton at this point, and I know he's a former first rounder and he has a lot of ability, but with his injuries, I don't know if he's a player that you draft and you say, cool, now we're done at that position, or that you sign and you say, cool, we're done.
This is interesting. Jeb says Peyton Wilson drops to us in the second. We take him. I mean, okay, Peyton Wilson was the Biletnikoff Award winner this year, wasn't he? He was incredible. And then he went to the combine and he did some of the most incredible workouts of all time. But you know what? Here's my concern: the injuries. Guys had a lot of injuries, and guys who get hurt tend to get hurt. If the Niners are going linebacker in the second round, I'd much rather go for Cedric Gray from North Carolina, who I think is just like he's another Greenlaw. He's another Warner. He's just he's going to be an all-pro linebacker, or at least a Pro Bowl linebacker. So I'm a big Cedric Gray fan over Peyton Wilson. But I understand why you'd say Peyton Wilson, because the workouts, the combine, the production, he had an amazing year. And if you get him, you could wind up with an amazing player. But you also could wind up with a guy who's hurt a lot. Where are you on this kid? Because this kid his film is crazy. His workouts are crazier, but the injuries are a factor.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously a really good player. I think you probably have to draft him too high with the injury concerns for me and where the 49ers are at with their roster. And I think they're telling us that they're very likely to go to the offensive side of the ball. It's either offensive line, wide receiver, or cornerback. That's what they're telling us with what they did in free agency. So they've already signed a veteran linebacker. They've already brought back Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. So, the room's starting to get pretty full. And at some point, Dre Greenlaw is going to be ready to play next year. I just don't think that that's the plan. So I think the 49ers have told us that linebacker is probably not something we should expect, but I'm with you. Like Cedric Gray, Edrin Cooper is probably going to go a little too early. I think he's the best linebacker in this draft right there with Wilson if he was healthy. I don't know where Wilson's going to go. If he falls to a certain point, then sure. But, his tape is too good, and he is too good of an athlete. I think a team's going to take a shot on him well before the 49ers should probably be taking a linebacker in this class. But, add more competition to it. I don't know if they like what they saw from, D. Winters and Jalen Graham as rookies last year. It feels like they must not, because of how hard but they've got a lot of bodies there. So I would love to see what those guys look like in year 2. And we've seen so many players, Greenlaw himself, take a huge step in year 2. We saw Hufanga take a huge step in year 2. By the way, were you a little shocked by the Michael Silver report about Hufanga might just completely lose his job? That was one of the strangest reports I've seen this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, he fell off a lot of tackles. He's had a lot of injuries going back to SC. I just think that you got to. I think he's, if he's healthy, he's your starter at strong safety.
Yeah.
I think he's really good in the box. Only thing is, it's like he's not the most powerful striker in the box. His timing and intelligence on the mesh point and when to attack it are just absolutely perfect. But he's not, you know what I'm saying, Brian? He's not like he falls off some blocks. I mean, he's a big hitter, but then he's not a for sure tackler. I love the idea of him in Brown long term, but if you told me they went for another safety in this draft, I think it would probably be wise, because what do you got behind him? You have George Odom, and then you got some real question marks.
Yeah. So you have secondary and somewhere on the offense. I mean, that's really where it seems like. And if you look at the players they're meeting with at the combine too, and their 30 visits and all the visits that are getting leaked, it's just that's clearly the direction they're going to go in the draft. Which of those positions, I'm not sure, but after the end of the 4th round, if they've taken 1 or 2 offensive linemen, a wide receiver, a corner, and a safety, I don't think anybody should be shocked.
One of the things the Niners do often, and it's frustrating, is they'll create a need that they didn't really have to have. You know what I mean? Like last year, they could have signed Robbie Gould, and instead they created this need of kicker and then used a high pick on a kicker.
Yeah, because they couldn't
had other needs.
Like, well, the New England is going to take our guy, so we have to take him early, and we have to take him now. They did the same thing, and it was New England that needed a punter when they drafted Wishnowsky, who was the first punter in that draft. They did the exact same thing earlier.
They create needs that aren't necessarily needs. The one spot that I could see them, and I'm not saying it's not necessarily a need, but like right now, Niner fans are talking about offensive tackle, defensive tackle, corner, wide receiver. I would think those are the 4 spots they're talking about for 31. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they took that kid Frazier from West Virginia and went with the center and said, you know what, we've got to, get our center of the future. Where are they in your mind with Brendel? Because Brendel's kind of the interesting guy. He was a street free agent. They kind of overpaid him. He kind of got worked by DJ Reader in the Bengals game. He's not great against big, strong nose guards. I don't know. I mean, is Brendel whose job we know Banks and Williams' jobs are safe, but how about Brendel, Feliciano, Burford, McKivitz? Who's in the most trouble there? And could the Niners surprise us all at 31 and go with like Zach Frazier or Jackson Powers, whatever, from Oregon, and go with the center? What
JPJ, yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson, Frazier. They might, Graham Barton might view him as just an interior only guy. I could absolutely see it, and if that's the best player, then I'm okay with it. And I think that's where the 49ers have put themselves with the offensive line. Is it's wide open for them to draft a player at really any of those 3 spots, center, right guard, or right tackle, because they don't have an answer long term at any of those spots. And left tackle, who knows how long. Hopefully Trent Williams plays forever and is amazing, but you can't count on that either. So there's a huge need on the offensive line, even though they can line up and play tomorrow. But I think that they do have the opportunity to wait and see who the best player is. And if they think that, Zach Frazier, center out of West Virginia, is the best offensive lineman left, and that the tackle prospects are a little dirtier than they would like, and they're not sure if they would stick a tackle, and they think he's a better prospect, then draft him. And if they draft a center, they could probably have him play guard year 1 until he's ready to make the calls, because we all know that Kyle Shanahan's centers are the ones that make the calls. And so they've never really drafted a starting center in this regime, because it's always been a veteran player to come in and handle that role. So would Kyle Shanahan allow a rookie center to come in and be making the calls, even seeing that how messed up calls, were part of the problem in the Super Bowl as it is. They're going to let a rookie come in and do that. I find that hard to believe. But if you're that good and you're a first round caliber center, you can absolutely start for a year at guard before you're ready to jump in and become that center of the future for the 49ers. So I can absolutely see that.
Did you see Frazier's film? Have you seen it all at all? I mean, he's just ridiculous. I mean, he just buries people into the ground and then drive blocks them down even after they're down. I mean, he's incredible. I could see them saying, it would be fine with me if they came out of this draft with their center, right guard, and right tackle of the future. I'd be fine with that. I love the guys from South Dakota State, and I do love that kid Frazier. Titus Moeller, two last ones here, and then we'll jump. Titus Moeller, what does Brandon Rice do best? How would the Niners use him? He's kind of like a Jawan Jennings, really. He's a really good route runner. He's about 6'3", 6'4". He's big, and he's really good in and out of the breaks. What I love about him, he plays the game with like a professional football player at the collegiate level, and you can see it. You can see the refinement. You can see the timing. You can see the reps that this kid has put in, and that's impressive. Now, he's not as gifted. He's not going to separate crazy. He doesn't have crazy wheels, but he's a good route runner, and I think you could play him right away. I mean, maybe even year one. That's what I see with him. What do you see with him, Brian? I mean, a lot of talk about Brendan Rice. Some people think it's just nepotism. I would say don't worry about that. It's far more than just the name. This kid's got real game. He's not spectacular, but he's very, very consistent.
Yeah, I do think there's a little name value, and people are probably hyping him up more. As good of a prospect as he is, I do see him as more of a, if the 49ers drafted him late in round 3, I think that's a good spot for him. I think he could develop into a starting wide receiver. I think he's someone that you would, a bigger slot guy early. But watch him at USC a little bit and seeing how he plays physically. And you see someone last year like, the Rams, they go out and get a 5th round rookie that's got some physicality, that can run routes from inside, outside. And all of a sudden you got something. And then you start looking at Brandon Rice, and he's from USC, and you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC that was kind of big and didn't kind of fast, but didn't really blow you away in any one category, but he was physical. He was tough. He could run routes. He could get open. And so could Brandon Rice actually be that guy that actually plays up in the NFL, because he does play like a pro, because he knows how to get open, because he plays tough, because he can catch the ball over the middle of the field. So he's a player I like a lot. He's not a game-breaking type on paper, but he's the archetype of the wide receivers that get overlooked a little bit. And then you're like, oh, how do we miss on this guy in the draft? He's just really stinking good.
Yeah. Last one. It's not a super, but it's a good comment here from KZ Guy. He says Tyler Harrell ran a 4.24 at his pro day. I love this player. This guy started at Alabama, I think, and then he was at Miami and Louisville, and he is just a ridiculous runner. And it brings me back to Danny Gray and the Ray thing. Well, let's finish with that. What the return game? Are the Niners covered with who they have? Do they need a home run hitter? Have you given up on Danny Gray? I don't know if you've seen this kid Harrell, but he is electric. And there's a few guys like this in the draft this year that can really, really run well and could be difference makers. Where are you with the return guy? Is that a need going into this draft, or do you believe in Danny Gray?
It's absolutely a need. It seems like the type of position the 49ers would sign a veteran free agent to fill that role. And they haven't yet, which is a little surprising. But it's absolutely a need, unless they're ready to give that job to Ronnie Bell. When Ray McCloud was out last year, it didn't seem like they loved what they saw from Ronnie Bell in that role, and he kind of fell out of favor just in the offense altogether. When he was a 7th round pick, I don't know how much you can put into what they think about him going forward, but certainly he should be able to compete with a rookie, maybe, if that's the route they want to go at the returner spot. But I assume the 49ers, we just talked about it with kicker and punter, and they did it with McGlinchey, when they shipped off a tackle and ended up drafting a tackle in the top 10. We didn't see that coming. It's a need spot, and they're going to hit it. So do they just go all in and draft the best returner, the earliest spot they can from the college game, or do they bring in a veteran player? But that's absolutely one of the needs, and it's kind of one of the things that nobody's talking about. And I'm trying to think of a prospect that would be like, okay, this player could be someone who's a type of player that's going to work into a big role in the offense eventually and be a top 3 receiver on the team once either Ayuk or Debo is gone, and maybe even a starting caliber player that could start out and be a return man early in his career. I don't know if that prospect is out there, but that I would be interested in that type of prospect.
Hey man, great stuff. Thanks for stopping by. Tell people, of course, Brian does the Locked On 49ers. So you guys are going every day, right? You're pretty much putting out a podcast pretty much every single day.
Every day.
Is it the same time every day?
5 days a week. Usually the audio pod, we usually record at night, and we post up the video on YouTube right away, and then we throw up the audio podcast first thing in the morning. So Monday through Friday, and we just recorded our Sunday night pod. That'll be up for you first thing on the audio podcast platforms on Monday morning. So Monday morning, you've got a fresh 49ers podcast in your feed when you drive to work. You can find us on YouTube. We do some live episodes as well every day. And I also do a second podcast. So I'm doing 10 podcasts a week right now. I do Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Former NFL scout, former ESPN writer, Matt Williamson. He's in the Pittsburgh area now, does a lot of stuff with Steelers.com. So no doubt we're going to talk a lot about Justin Fields tomorrow on that show when we reconvene on Monday. So daily shows, Peacock and Williamson covering the entire NFL, and then Locked On 49ers covering your San Francisco 49ers daily.
One last thought, and I don't understand the Chicago Bears general manager, and he's considered to be a bright young GM, Ryan Poles. Why would you hand over a quarterback that is talented as Fields? Now, granted, we've already outlined he holds the ball too long, and his feel's not great, and this and that. But to a quality organization like the Pittsburgh Steelers, there's I would say better than 50-50 chance that surrounded on the Steelers, a year to watch under Russell Wilson, surrounded by better players on both sides of the line of scrimmage, that Fields rescues himself in Pittsburgh and has some kind of a career. And I just think if you're Poles, man, I mean, I know you want to do right by the kid, but I don't know, man. I mean, it's like if he goes to Pittsburgh and has an incredible career, you draft Caleb Williams and Caleb Williams falls on his face, you could have the shortest career in the history of football. I mean, 3 years from now, if Justin Fields is playing good football in Pittsburgh and Caleb Williams went 1 to Chicago and isn't figuring it out, Ryan Poles is probably fired, right? Why would he make such a move like that? It just seemed like he almost dialed up the pressure on himself for no particular reason.
Yeah, it had to be that, first of all, he legitimately, and apparently everyone loves Fields in the building. They legitimately wanted to get him to the best spot they could, knowing that they're going to draft a quarterback over the top of him. And they probably, and we saw this with Lance and Garoppolo for years in San Francisco. Wasn't it a breath of fresh air? And I'm sure it was a weight off Brock Purdy's shoulders, just not have Jimmy G or Trey Lance on the team this year. I think there's something to that. Just don't have any doubt. Don't have guys that still love the old quarterback, getting asked questions about it in at the podium every single day in training camp. And so I think it was just like, look, addition by subtraction, it's better for the organization to move on from him. And seeing the way things went with Brock Purdy, it's hard to argue with that, because I don't think it would have been better to have Trey Lance or Jimmy G in the organization this year for Brock Purdy and the 49ers. So that's probably the way to look at it. And yeah, just they're going to start their guy. And so even if he's bad, Fields wouldn't have played all year anyway, unless he gets hurt. And so, yeah, but I'm with you. Steelers is a good spot for Fields. He could absolutely turn it around there.
We got 2,000 people in the room. Go check out Brian Peacock on Locked On 49ers. If you have yet to like and subscribe over here on the Krueger Show, please do. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle. For Brian, I'm Larry, and that's it. We're out.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared.